Thank you for purchasing our on-location Rebel t5i shoot. It's been a long time in the making. A lot of people have been requesting that I go out with a simple amateur camera, and that I did. I took the Rebel t5i, it's in Israel it's the 700, and I came with the 50mm 1.8 lens. The whole setup, like I tell you in the video, is around $500. Super simple. My regular setup is two Canon 5D Mark III and 5D Mark IV with my 85mm and my 24-70 2.8mm lens. I always come with a flash assistant with a whole thing. So I was really in super simple mode. Now I found some very interesting things. The biggest difference that I found between using an entry-level DSLR and my sophisticated professional cameras is there's two things. Number one is the focus. The odds or the chances of getting a sharp picture are much slimmer than they are of getting a sharp picture with the 5Ds. With the 5Ds, I'm looking at probably 2 in 10, 1 in 5 pictures are not sharp, and with the Rebel, I was finding maybe the opposite. Maybe 2 in 10 were sharp, or maybe 3 in 10 were sharp. So that was a big difference. Also, the depth of field when you're dealing with a crop frame camera, which is the Rebel, next to the full frame camera, which is the 5D, the depth of field is dramatically different. Like, not just, it is perceivably different, and that makes a big difference. For example, when I'm shooting with my 5D, when I'm shooting my 85mm, if I'm shooting 2 people, I'm at 2.2, 2.5, or even 3 people at 2.5. Whereas with the Rebel, with my 50mm, which we know gets converted really to an 80mm because you times it by 1.6, I'm able to get away with 1.8 even with 3 or 4 people. So that made a very big difference. Another final difference I found was the access to the controls, mainly the AI Servo. Like I'll tell you in the video, I use AI Servo a lot because I like to take pictures of people walking and the distance is changing. So in the 5D, you're able to make a custom change on the depth of field preview button on the front of the camera, which will give you, which will allow you to flick into AI Servo. And on the Rebel, you have to go into the menu. It's not such a big deal, but it does make a little bit of a difference. But apart from that, you would be shocked how good these entry-level cameras are. So for the extra $2,500, obviously you'll pay that, and you need it. There's other features as well, but the difference in quality of the images is not quite as dramatic as you might think. We went to a generic forest in my area. There was lots of trash around. It was about 3.5 hours or so before sunset in the summer, which means that the conditions weren't optimal for photography, but it was fine. We got away with it. We used a lot of shade. We were working with the light coming from behind a lot. There's a couple of things that I wanted to bring out. In regards to settings, maybe it's worth to take a piece of paper just to write this down because it's going to help you go through the whole course. White balance, my rule for white balance that I've lived by for many years, and I still live by it. I don't shoot in RAW, which means I'm having to nail things in camera. I don't have that little bit of leeway, which is actually a lot less leeway than people think it is. The difference nowadays between RAW and JPEG is really quite minimal, in my opinion. Not to say that RAW doesn't have its time and place, it absolutely does, but JPEG nowadays is so versatile and so intelligent that there's a lot to do with JPEG. I don't shoot in RAW. White balance, we're trying to nail in camera. So the rule I've developed is like this: when we're outdoors in good natural light, our default setting is sun. If we see that the image is too cool, that does happen quite regularly, you change to cloud. And if you see the image is too warm, that happens irregularly, you change to AWB. That's it, that's my white balance. And the most important thing with white balance is be consistent. Because if you're consistent, once you get back into the studio, you can do a batch edit and everything's going to be fine. It's really not a big thing. I know that a lot of photographers turn it into a very big, overwhelming subject. It really isn't when we're outdoors in natural sunlight. In regards to the settings, there's a mnemonic that I've created that really is going to help us, and this is how it goes. Aperture widest, shutter speed quickish, ISO lowish. Okay, I'll say one more time. Aperture widest, shutter speed quick-ish, ISO lowish. Okay, aperture widest means widest, making sure that you've got enough depth of field to cover your subject. So when I'm shooting with one person, I'm basically always maxed out. So aperture widest is not meaning shooting at 1.8 when you've got a family of 15 people. It means widest, giving you just the amount of depth of field you need to keep all your subjects focused. It's never a good decision to get a blurrier background at the expense of blurry subjects. That's obviously a bad decision. Shutter speed quickish. We don't need a crazy quick shutter speed. My benchmark is a 200th of a second, but even at a 200th of a second, I don't feel super comfortable. I start feeling really comfortable at around a 400 or 500th of a second, so that's quickish. And ISO lowish, we don't need to bust ourselves to get 100 every time. So these are the settings. I keep my ISO at 200, finished, forget about ISO. Most of the time, 90% of the shoot, I'm shooting at 1.8 with my aperture, because again, like I said, when you're using the crop frame, you end up with that extra depth of field, so you don't have to be thinking too much about the aperture, not like with the full frame. And that means that I have one variable to attain my correct exposure, and that's shutter speed. So you'll see throughout all the pictures that really I'm only working with one variable, just shutter speed. I've got my white balance is set at sun, my ISO is at 200, my aperture is the widest, and then the only decision I need really now to make is my shutter speed, and that's going to give me my exposure. Another quick point that I just want to mention before we jump in is the concept of engineering the odds. There's two things, I'm going to be mentioning this through the class. We need to engineer the odds for two things. Number one, technically, and then number two, the subject. Technically, the odds that we're engineering are for focus primarily. And the subject, we're engineering the odds for expression. So focus is distance, that's what focus is. Now, if I need to engineer the odds for distance, that means I should be focusing, for example, I'm going to take 10 pictures of a person, I'm focusing on their eyes. I'm going to focus 6 of the pictures on their eyes. 1 I'm going to focus on the nose, that's a different distance. 1 I'm going to focus on the ear, that's a different distance. 1 I'm going to focus on the forehead, that's another different distance. So we've given ourselves a little bit of leeway, just a slight little bit of leeway with our distances, which means we've engineered the odds. That means we should never ever throw a picture away from focus. And you're going to see that again and again through this shoot. In regards to expression, we're taking a lot of pictures. Taking a lot of pictures obviously engineers the odds, and we're trying to get attention. So you'll see me doing as much as I can, investing as much energy as I can to try and keep my subject's attention, and then that obviously multiplies the odds exponentially, so to make sure that you're going to walk away with the best shots possible. And finally, just a word of how we've created the course for you is there's the actual shoot, which was around 40 minutes of footage. We've created 2 options for you. There's the shoot, which is, like I said, 40 minutes of footage. And then what I've done is I've taken apart the shoot and I've split it into about 12 or so sections. And each section, I give you my analysis in studio and I explain what's going on with each picture. The reason why we've presented you 2 options, there's the shoot, the standalone shoot, and then there's the shoot divided up with, after each section, the in-studio analysis, is so that you can watch the shoot and just get an idea of the energies that I'm dealing with, because so much of portrait photography is to do with the energies and the momentum and moving from shot to shot, moving from location to location, making sure that you're touching people, you're walking with them, you're engaging them, you're speaking with them. And you'll miss that if you were to be watching it section by section. But watching just the whole thing all the way through, then you miss a lot of the technical information. So my advice to you is watch the whole thing all the way through and get a feel, or most of it all the way through, get a feel for the energies and the flavour of what's going on. And then secondly, sit down when you've got some time. You can do it in sections, and then you'll get all the technical information. Hopefully it's going to be really, really helpful. Okay, hope you enjoy it. Wishing you all the best.